What's up, everybody? May 28th edition of the Holy Smokes at Fightful MMA podcast. Yours truly at Showdown Joe, joined as always afterwards, or all the time, Tuesdays and Saturdays or Sundays today. Hashtag UFC Stockholm by the man himself, Sean Ross Sapp. Make sure you give him a follow at Sean Ross Sapp. Follow yours truly at Showdown Joe. A somewhat, I guess, cyclic event in Stockholm. I was going to start off this podcast by saying it was an amazing night of high-level sparring. They should have called it not UFC Fight Night, but UFC Sparring Night, but that quickly changed with at least the last 3 or 4 fights, or at least 3 fights, with a couple sprinkled in there. Overall, Sean, before we start throwing out some grades out there, what did you think of the event?
I thought that it was very promising for the light heavyweight division. Very, very promising. We got a new name who was already ranked number 5, and we questioned that. Well, he solidified that in Volkan Ozdemir. And I would think that an Ozdemir versus Gustafsson main event is coming to a European event near you. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. I'll get into the title talk and Gustafsson. Like, I saw John Anik tweet, and I was like, whoa, let's slow it down just a little bit. But not a bad card. It was it was really inconsistent. You would have a great finish, then like 1 or 2 decisions. There was this decision a lot of people didn't like between Silva and Madadi. I was okay with it. But we had some third round.
Which John Anik tweet were you referring to?
The one where he said, "Get that man a title shot."
Gotcha.
I'm talking about Gustafsson. I'll talk about that in a moment. We saw a guy in Abdul Razak Al Hassan who had never been past 90 seconds. He got tested and downed. We probably saw the last of Chris Camozzi. So there were some things that happened on this show.
Yeah, I mean, Angela Hill, I don't think she called me out on Twitter, but she recommended I check out the preliminary bouts or the earlier fights on UFC Fight Pass, which I already did. I simply stated I was so happy with Jack Hermanson kicking off the main card with finally a fight, in my opinion, that had me move on my couch, had me just sort of like, thank goodness, because you go up and down, and anyone that's watched our podcasts from day one knows how much it drives me batty whenever, hypothetically, if I'm out and I've got to come home and race to catch up with a UFC event, there's nothing worse, because I don't care about spoilers. I'll look at the results right away just so I know how much time it's going to be required to catch up. Thankfully, I watched this event from the very beginning all the way until the main event. But still, there were some fights where I'm like, oh my God, it's just sparring. Like, I know it's not high-level MMA. We weren't expecting this to be a UFC pay-per-view, and I talk about it all the time, how I just want, I just wish there were less fights, less events, and more higher quality MMA. So I just simply said, thank you, Jack Hermanson, for this. It was a good fight. Well, it was a quick fight, 2 minutes with Alex Nicholson. But it was a fight. It was someone looking for a finish. 2 guys that went in there, and then Angela Hill's like, "No, Joe, you need to check out the earlier fights." I'm like, I did. There was a couple of good fights that were on there. I like the Madadi fight, but no, I want to. At this point now, I don't know if it's my brain, Sean, that's had enough of MMA where I don't see guys or girls trying to finish fights. I don't want to see it, man. Let's just see some fights. Go for a finish. I know it can't always happen, but fight for damn sake.
Yeah, this card, as we've mentioned, did not need to be 12 fights long. But the Marcin Held finish, he's gone. He's gone. They just cut 12 people. He's next on the chopping block. Chris Camozzi's on the chopping block. He's pretty much gone. Reza Madadi might be gone. He's lost 3 of 4. And, they're all too happy to quickly cut anybody that they can. Musaki might be gone. So this largely may have been a show where they were like, let's trim some fat. Damian Stasiak made that line against Pedro Munoz look a little ridiculous, but ultimately Pedro Munoz won. Pedro Munoz looked very good. He's now won 3 in a row. He's only lost 1 fight in his last 6, so that's pretty good. But as you mentioned, Alex Nicholson, there were a lot of people really happy that he got beat. He's been accused of domestic violence. Not accused, he straight up has made racist comments. So to see him get knocked out in 2 minutes, you're not going to see a lot of people shed a tear over that. And actually, a guy whose fight I called last night, a CES and now premier MMA welterweight champion in Chris Curtis has feuded with Alex Nicholson and Mike Perry. Who hasn't feuded with Mike Perry? So I know he was thrilled to see that. I'll talk a little bit more about Premier MMA Championship later on. But Alex Nicholson got dominated. He stood up like, oh, man, can't believe you stopped this fight, which we also saw Ben Saunders do later, which was weird and a little funny. Yeah, good for Jack Hermanson because he needed a rebound after losing to Cesar Ferreira. I think it was in November, and this was the perfect way to do it. And on a show like this, coming off of 3 straight decisions that we saw in the prelims, this is the type of finish that you want to see, and he gave it to us.
Yeah, there's a bunch of peeps in the live chat right now. Guys, if you're out there, you want something to say, you want to talk about something, you got an opinion, by all means, live chat, top right of your screen. Kyler James wants us to tweet out the link. I actually did tweet out the link. Kyler, if you get a chance, just retweet what I did or what Sean did or what the @Fightful MMA account did.
I want to hit people with a program note. Sorry to interrupt. We won't be doing a show right after Bellator 180. Instead, we're going to do a show the next night after the UFC card, because Lee versus Chiesa is that night. I figured it would be better to run that post-show podcast right after. That way we didn't kind of clog the feeds. We could kind of encompass everything that evening.
Are you worried that we're not doing nothing for the next 3 or 4 weeks?
No. Well, we got plenty of time. Holloway and Aldo. Lewis and Hunt.
So guys, Sean messages me earlier today and he's like, yeah, we're not going to go live after Bellator. We're going to go live after the UFC. And I'm like, Bellator? Is he talking about the pay-per-view? And isn't that thing like 3 or 4 weeks away? So I said, you're talking about the Bellator pay-per-view, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, are we not doing shows between now and then? So I was just being sarcastic.
Oh, no, we are.
But yes,
Holm Correa, Lewis Hunt, UFC 212. This is a big week for me. Last night I did the commentary at Premier MMA Championship.
How did that go?
It went very well. Very well. There were some really good talents and some not so good talents. Like Nathan Mayness, I think he's 8-0 as a pro now. That was good to see. Chris Curtis, who is knocking on the door of the UFC. And there was this kid, and you will never see me tout amateurs. There was a kid named Blake Golden. I saw that on your tweet, yeah. It was a poise that I've never seen out of a 1-0 amateur. It was just amazing. The head movement, it was incredible. I would be shocked if he weren't a pro by next year. But yeah, that was a fun time. Got blood all over my notes, as is tradition at these events. That was fun. You all can check it out on flowcombat.com. But yeah, then let's see. We have this show today. I've got shows tomorrow, and we got the Memorial Day, of course. Then Tuesday, 2 shows. Wednesday, hopefully, Jimmy Van will be there. He's awaiting the birth of his child, Joe.
Every time I ask him to connect, he's like, dude, my wife is pregnant. No, actually, she's not. She's very pregnant. No, actually, she's not. She's very, very pregnant, Joe. And I'm like, okay, well, you let me know, bud.
Yeah, then next Saturday, my wife's best friend gets married, and I'm in the wedding. I'm an usher, so I got to deal with that all next weekend. And then hopefully get back in time for UFC 212 and know what I'm talking about for a show with you.
You'll be fine. You are so knowledgeable. I can give you a half hour to prep for any show, and you'll be perfectly fine. I think you've proven to everybody that your knowledge is almost second to none. So I
can't imagine the wedding and reception going until like 11:30. And if I get there by 11:30, I can catch up on the fights. Like that ain't a problem. Skip through the mid round, skip through before and after, and all that stuff. So.
Man, when we go to a wedding up here, I don't know if it's just because of my Italian descent or my Italian heritage, we're not home till 3 or 4 in the morning. So good for you.
Yeah. And Sean Bio says, we won't have a break until August 6th after UFC 214. Yeah, UFC likes to stock these summers up, and I'm finally going on my honeymoon in September.
Yeah, well,
finally.
Good for you, by the way. Are you going anywhere specific?
Just Orlando. I told her we could go anywhere in the world, and she wants to go to Harry Potter World.
Just do it, whatever she says, man.
And I said, you know what? All right, we'll do it.
She wants that, dude. You can go somewhere else later on when you gathered up some more brownie points. The one thing regarding what Sean Bio said and how you just mentioned how the UFC stacks up these summer, stacks up the summer. Their only competition really is Major League Baseball. They're not going against the NFL, NHL. Yeah, they're not going up against the NFL, NHL. or the NBA. So they try and take over for the summer months with just baseball. And there is a period, I think, around the All-Star break where the UFC, I think only once over the past 7 years, has dropped the ball, because there's a time frame around the I think it's the baseball All-Star game where there's nothing in the world of sports that is going on. Yeah. And it's a perfect opportunity for the UFC to take over that mainstream sports audience.
Well, the interesting thing is today's show, Sweden, next week's show, Brazil, the week after that, New Zealand, the week after that, Singapore, and then they're finally back in Oklahoma City at the end of the month for Lee versus Chiesa, which I can't wait for.
Do you remember the podcasts when that bout was rumored to be the main event? And I was like, what are they doing? This is not going to happen. Like, they need something here. And then Frank Trigg was the one that said, yeah, one of these two guys has to do something. They both got to sort of raise their stock. They got to bring awareness to this. And then that press conference happened. And then, boom, we're all talking about it.
As they say in the wrestling business, that's called selling you a ticket. In MMA, sometimes they call it selling you wolf tickets, but I don't think these are wolf tickets between these two. I think they really dislike each other. Oh well, we've got Sweden to talk about, damn it.
Yes. We'll start off in the main event, obviously. Actually, do you want to work your way up, or do you want to work your way down?
Let's work our way up.
All right.
Build an audience.
All right. What's that?
We can build the audience.
All right. In terms of the preliminary UFC fight card, or the Fight Pass card, Darren Till, he looked pretty damn good, emerging victorious over Jason Ayeri. And of course, Hadzovic taking on Marcin Held. You mentioned Marcin Held is done 7 seconds into the third round. He gets KO'd. Okay, he gets kneed, he gets dropped, he's done. I'm personally surprised that Marcin Held's. I was going to expect more from him when he came over to the UFC. Unfortunately, it hasn't panned out, and you're pretty convinced that he's done.
Yeah, 3 straight losses in the UFC. The first 2 against Lozon and Sanchez, that happens. But he's giving the UFC these lengthy fights, and he's not winning. So I've got to imagine they'll cut him. Don't know if he'll be welcomed back to Bellator, because he was a Bellator guy for about 4 years and then just kind of left them off of a win, off of a really hot streak, honestly, outside of his loss to Will Brooks. But he'll get some offers. Like, I'd imagine he'll fight for KSW or somebody like that, who had a big show this weekend too.
Yeah, and then kicking off the preliminary card on Fox Sports 1, Bojan Veljković, I hope I said it right, Veljković, and as soon as he did what he did to Nico Musaki with the stank leg, I thought there's going to be so many gifs and memes that are going to come out now of Nico Musaki doing that sort of dance, whatever. But hey, listen, when you get clocked in that manner, that's what happens. I think it was a pretty good performance from Bojan.
Yeah, I thought so too. And like I said, he may have booted Musaki out of the UFC with that one.
Oh, hold on, Sean. Before you say that, you think they're going to give Nico a little bit of credence, the fact that he was off for 2 years?
This regime, no, I don't. And it was over 2 years. And I mean, they've given him fight after fight after fight in Sweden, like I think 3 in a row. So I mean, maybe if they're like, God, we got to put another guy from Sweden on the show, but I think this event sells just as many tickets without him as with him.
Good point. Sorry, did you want to go ahead and talk about the fight there?
No, I thought that Musaki looked, or not Musaki,
Veljković or Veljković.
Veljković looked very good. Sorry, it's been a long day already.
I hear you. I hear you.
Outside of that, I thought the main card, or this Fox Sports 1 prelim card, not the best. Not the best.
Well, there was some controversy with the Silva and Haddad fight. There are some people that are, for me, you could have scored it either way. Silva, I think, did emerge victorious, but you can make the argument that Haddad did win that fight. In the end, it was a split decision. 2 judges had it 29-28 one way. 1 judge had it 29-28 the opposite way. Either way, you could make the argument, but it wasn't that spectacular of a fight, but it got the crowd rejuvenated again. Because when you see your guy get nailed in the face like Nico did and do that stank leg, kind of silences them. And then, the action started to pick up, with Silva emerging victorious. I don't know exactly what's next for him, because it didn't really stand out as a performance where he was an eyebrow raiser, but he does emerge victorious.
Indeed. And this is these prelim cards, even on a Swedish event in the middle of the afternoon on Fox Sports 1, it's an opportunity to help make a name for yourself, and that's what you have to do. And this essentially, in my opinion, this was a fight to save their jobs, because Bojan I think he had a draw and then dropped a split decision, and he came in and didn't have the greatest fight. I think it was in Croatia last year against, God, I can't even pronounce that guy's name. I remember his name was Alessio. Didn't have the best fight there on that Rothwell dos Santos card. So he was, I think these two were fighting for their job. And you see that when the UFC cuts a dozen people this weekend, that they are trying to cut it down. I went and looked, Joe, thinking, man, the UFC's probably trimmed down their roster a bunch. No, they're still well over 500.
My goodness.
So I would imagine that they want to get that down. I would imagine so, especially with this Contender Series coming up.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later. Trevor Smith taking on Chris Camozzi. That was not the most exciting fight on this card, and it was what began yours truly thinking, I got to say something. This is not high-level MMA. I get it was wrestling, and I get there's a game plan, and some guys can neutralize each other or girls can neutralize each other, but oh my goodness, was it the longest 15 minutes that I experienced all day, and it just didn't get any better from there until a while. Trevor emerges victorious. You're thinking Camozzi's done.
Yeah, time to stop doing him favors. And I don't think you're doing him favors by letting him fight in your company anymore. I mean, financially, sure, but no hip movement, nothing. He stayed pinned on his back. He couldn't stop the takedown. This is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who has been fighting for over a decade, has been training for even longer than that, and he's only 30.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because the lack of foot movement, the lack of real takedown defense, and then not doing much on the ground had me thinking, like, what's going on here? Are you injured? Should you even be fighting here? Or have you just completely lost it, where your brain is telling you you need to do this or that or this or that, but the body's not reacting?
And Trevor Smith he's not like a can or anything. He's won 3 of 4, but he's often competed in that cycle of guys like Talis Lates, Ed Herman, Dan Miller, Chris Camozzi, and where Chris Camozzi has fought a lot of those same people where, they're there, but they're not going to make a whole lot of noise, with the exception of maybe a Talis Lates on occasion. But if you've lost 3 in a row here, he managed to piece together 3 wins last year, in part because of Tom Watson landing groin strikes, but he's had his, I think 3 or 4 runs in the UFC. After this, it's time to cut him loose. I understand he won those 3 fights in a row, so that was enough to give him this leash, but time to let it go. I don't want to see him, even though, he can go the distance with the Lorenz Larkins or Rafael Natal. I don't want to see him get bounced around anymore. He's got to be up there among those who had the most losses in UFC history. Has to be at this point.
Yeah,
been around forever.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. So we go from a middleweight fight where, yours truly sitting on the couch just going, holy smokes, guys, come on, let's do something here. All right, bantamweight fight. Yes, bantamweight, 135 pounders. It's going to be fast. It's going to be exciting. Pedro Munoz, huge favorite. Damian Stasiak's going to have to prove that, he can bang in there. What the hell are you guys doing? Please, more. In the end, Pedro Munoz, 30-27, 29-28, 29-28. Your thoughts?
Yeah, coming off of 2 straight performances of the night, I didn't expect this type of performance out of Pedro Munoz. But, I mean, he won. So, it's really all you can ask for. He
did say he's the best in the world.
Yeah, he might launch himself maybe in the top 10. Maybe Eduardo and Wineland are above him right now. Maybe he belongs in over them. I don't know. He has that win over Scoggins. That was a good win, welcoming Scoggins to the division, but not much to speak of.
See, when I wrote my article, and when I do analysis for a lot of the fun bets articles that I write for Fightful.com, I generally take a look at the caliber of competition both fighters have competed against. That Scoggins victory stood out to me. I thought, yeah, if you're taking out Scoggins that way by welcoming him to the division and doing what you did, Damian, you're going to have some major problems. And instead, I was like, oh my God, man, like, come on, man. So again, styles make fights. That's just the oldest adage in combat sports.
Yep, and this made a bad fight.
It was a bad fight. It's the one that is supposed to generate, usually pay-per-view, but it's supposed to generate hype for the main card. It's generally there to determine, hey, you know what? If you watch this, you're going to be amped up. This is the one that's going to get you. If you haven't ordered the pay-per-view, you're going to order the pay-per-view. Yeah. Thankfully,
eight of the first 9 fights on tonight's show went to at least the 3rd round. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but isn't it funny that when that happens, it's never just like a bunch of kick-ass fights? Now, this was I've seen far worse. I'll say that much, because I like Silva Madadi was okay to me because Silva pressed forward a little bit, but then when he got put on his back, there wasn't a lot happening. So that prevented that from being a good fight for me.
Dude, all 6 fights before the main card went to the 3rd round. I want to grab pliers and start pulling my teeth out, man. And
while Bojan and the Hadzovic finishes were exciting, it took an awful long time to get there. The Munoz thing, I like seeing a high-level guy like Pedro Munoz compete, but I don't know that Damian Stasiak is high-level as well, so I didn't get that much joy out of it.
No, not at all. Then we move on finally to the main card, where I didn't say I did my Ric Flair impression where I got off the couch and did the old, little movement there, whatever you want to call it, the Ric Flair walk, whatever he calls it. But Jack Hermanson takes out Alex Nixon. We talked about it, but it was finally a situation where I almost had a sigh of relief, like, okay, maybe things are going to change here. Maybe the night is going to change. And he pulls off that the TKO there. It was a schoolyard bully beatdown. That's exactly what it was. It was 2 minutes of a guy that's saying, I'm going to kick the crap out of you. And he did that. And when he got his hooks in, it was the one fight where my son was actually on the couch with me. I didn't want him to watch the event. I wanted him to just focus on just doing he was doing a whole bunch of school stuff. He was playing Wii U. It's a long day for him. It's 6 hours without daddy on a Sunday afternoon, but he wanted to come in and spend time with daddy, Sean. He sat with me, and it's the one fight where he's like, that guy got a beat down, daddy. I said, yep, yes, he did. Thank goodness. So, I know,
it broke things up. It broke things up, but I'll tell you this: watching this at 1 to 3 in the afternoon is a hell of a lot more tolerable, isn't it?
Okay, I gotta be careful what I say here. Yes and no. Okay, now people that are watching. People are global. Okay, we're all over. We got viewers right now from all over the world. Okay, I'm a Canadian. I live just north of Toronto. We've had horrendous weather, not a horrendous winter, a pretty bad winter, and a brutal spring of just we can't do nothing outside. I've yet to take out my patio furniture from my backyard. We got a super sunny day today. An absolutely beautiful sunny day, which is Latin for me, Sean, to go into the garage, take everything out, bring it to the backyard, and blah, blah. No, because my job entails me watching UFC events, so I've been inside all day.
It doesn't get dark till like 9, though.
What's that?
It doesn't get dark till like 9. We'll be done with this show in like 20 more minutes.
Yeah, but I'm a father. I'm a husband. Spent 0 time with the family today. I'm taking them out to an amazing ice cream place in a town over. It's a beautiful strip. I'm taking the family out for being patient with me today for working on a Sunday afternoon when we could have been outside doing whatever we got to do. This is my job. They get it. They understand it. So you're asking me, do I like these Sunday afternoon cards? Hell yeah. Middle of winter, son. Middle of winter. Bring it on the middle of winter, not in the spring or summer where us Canadians barely have good weather to enjoy. Our time for good weather is this much when the year is this much. So we want to enjoy it, but, and as hence the reason why I was so excited with what Jack Hermanson did. I'm like, you're now making it worth my time.
Yes.
Okay. And then we move on to a Canadian in the welterweight division, Nordine Taleb, taking on the debuting undefeated Oliver Enkamp, whose face looks absolutely fantastic to be young again, Sean. But he made it to the big show, and he fought a veteran. And I don't know how one scorecard. I don't know if my math is it's Canadian math, Swedish math, but 2 judges gave it 30-27. One gave it 29-28. Can you explain what I missed here?
No, I can't. Except for, how did we miss Oliver Enkamp turning 25 because he looks 16? He's a very, very poor man's Wonder Boy, and I mean, like, not a poor man's Wonder Boy, like a homeless man's Wonder Boy. And it's funny because he fought very similarly. He had a similar stance, and the blueprint was like a homeless blueprint to beat him. Nordine Taleb would back him up to the cage where he couldn't pop in and out, where Enkamp couldn't pop in and out. Then he would land strikes. That was the way to beat him, and he did. And then took Enkamp down to the ground. Enkamp couldn't do anything on the ground. His best option was his jiu-jitsu, and it didn't get him anywhere. Nordine Taleb picked up the win. Another guy that I thought had to win.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a must for him.
Yeah. The guys in the live chat, I see a couple comments there. I'll keep looking at it as we talk, as Sean and I talk here. Did you like the fact that this event was on a Sunday afternoon, or do you still like them on a Saturday night, depending on obviously where you're from? Throw up your comments there. I want to see. I'll try and get almost a ballpark figure of yays or nays. Then we go on to the welterweight fight with Omari Akhmedov taking on Abdul Razak Al Hassan, whose total fight time heading in his professional career, heading into this fight here, was just over 6.5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Unfortunately, for the very first time, he goes the distance and loses a split decision. He was still teeing off. Akhmedov has a jaw from hell. We'll get to Teixeira's jaw in a minute, but Omari did what he had to do. Every single time he was in trouble, Sean, he's like, nope, we're done striking. Whoop, I'm going for a takedown. So kudos to Akhmedov for being cerebral and being able to adapt throughout this fight.
Yeah, I'd love to see Al Hassan utilize that judo a lot more. Like, because if you're a black belt in judo, you gotta utilize it. I mean, he's finished all of his fights in like a minute and a half. So it's worked for him. But Omari, another guy I think had to win to stay in the UFC, did so, and Al Hassan needed to be tested. Generally, you'd like to be tested before you're about to turn 32, like Al Hassan, but Al Hassan got a really, really late start in MMA to begin with. But this is a fight that he needed. He needed to, one, go longer than 90 seconds, and two, see that he could go the distance. And one judge thought he won. It was one of those rare 30-27, 30-27, 28-29 scorecards. But yeah, I mean, this wasn't a bad fight.
I didn't mind it. It was good MMA. It was good MMA. It wasn't super exciting, but I like seeing the stuff that Omari was doing. I like the fact that Abdul was doing whatever he could to try and finish the fight. He was hunting. He was chasing. He was being the predator. Omari was being that smart sort of prey and doing what he had to do. But Abdul was still throwing that hard right hand, although he was loading up, looking for that one-punch knockout. Hey, listen, it's not always recommended, but in a situation where you want to continue that winning streak, yeah, why not? Just throw it out there, especially, with a guy like me who was so bored pretty much throughout the whole day. Yeah, man, keep doing it. But I was also, appreciative. Omari was like, I'm not getting tagged by this dude, right? There was a size discrepancy there. If you paid close attention, there was a size, like Omari was much bigger than Abdul, but at the same time, he's like, this kid throwing bombs. He's got power. That's leather TNT right there. I don't want to get hit by this. We're going down on the ground. I'm going to control you. I'm going to get you to relax. And, Abdul did get up a few times. So it was a good mixed martial arts bout, in my opinion, where we got to see the various intricacies in MMA. Hence the reason why I liked it. I don't mind that one going the distance. I would not want to see, 9 of these fights in a row, but I don't mind that one.
Weird to think that Omari is 2 years younger than Al Hassan.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Before we get to the final 3 fights, I do want to ask you, and hopefully I'll be able to do this on every single post show. I want to get your report card, and guys in the chat and girls in the chat, if you want to throw up your thoughts as well. I see most people are kind of iffy on the event actually happening on a Sunday afternoon. I want to get your scorecard as a fellow guy that does play-by-play and understands the broadcasting world and understands commentary in general. I want you to grade John Gooden, A to F, as well as Dan Hardy, A to F. I'll give you mine right off the bat, so there's no pressure to you to come up with something. John Gooden, in my opinion, A+. Dan Hardy, A-. And the only reason why I'll give Dan Hardy an A-, because not just because I love the guy, he's always been so amazing to me over my career. The only issue, and it's one thing, if he did 100 things, he got 99 perfect in my books. The only thing that I kind of disliked was every time a punch was pretty much thrown, he's freaking out. Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not. They're not that great, those punches. You know what Gustafsson did, in that fight there, and even what Glover was doing and stuff. Those are O's. Those are big. Oh my gosh. Some of the fights, no, man, no. So we don't need to hear that all the time. But other than that, I think Dan's breakdowns and just as an analyst was fantastic. What are your grades?
It's funny because my wrestling viewers who also watch this will really appreciate that you just said that, because we literally kept an O count on WWE one time because WWE coached their announcers to scream "Oh" during matches, not call moves. That's one of the reasons why Vince McMahon didn't like Mauro Ranallo a lot, because he called moves. Yeah, well, there's a big issue there, but he actually called moves. There was one guy, Tom Phillips in particular. He called 127 moves as on a wrestling show. 127. Yeah, wow. It's brutal. That's really my only complaint about Dan Hardy. And occasionally one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to like set the stage by saying he's doing this here. You don't want to add here, and you don't want to say he punched him. You got to use the pronoun. You got to say their names. That way, if somebody's not paying attention, they know who's doing what. You don't see a lot of that out of Hardy and Gooden. They're very good about using their pronouns. So I love listening to them on commentary. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I think.
Hey, Jinx! Jinx Coke, show me Coke.
I'm a huge fan of Brian Stan as well. I want to be careful that we do these gradings because I could give you a couple of D's, E's, and F's in my opinion. But moving forward, we'll if I'm ever going to give someone a low grade, I'll explain why. Ole Samuele, not a big fan, calls them monotone robots with British accents. I respectfully disagree. I think they're absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I definitely like what they bring to the table, and the whole he thing that you mentioned, or she thing. I had a producer that I worked with in the past, not many times, but he was just fantastic, always in our ear, and basically was explaining to somebody that was working next to him. He was a color commentator, didn't have much experience, and kept reminding the party, you need to say the person's first name or last name when you're explaining something to the viewer, because if you keep saying he or she needs to do this, not all viewers are educated. They may not know which he or she you are mentioning. So you have to mention those names. When I work with Kamaru Usman on Titan FC, he's fantastic. I mean, I thought that we were getting major compliments from a lot of the people in Florida that were able to catch the broadcast, especially the truck, especially with the chemistry that we had, and that was his best show. I said, I agree. I mean, Kamaru Usman was absolutely fantastic. For a guy that's very calm, Sean, very, very calm, I got to get his energy up and running every time we go to a UFC commercial or a UFC Fight Pass commercial or whatever. I'm like, come on, bro. You need a coffee? What do you need? Let's get this going. Let's get a little bit more excited here. And you saw it, and he's getting better and better with every rep. And he's fantastic. But he knows that when he's talking about someone, you got to mention their name. Other people I've worked with in the past, didn't matter how many times you told them, Sean. Not going to happen.
Oh, yeah. I've had people that try to finish my sentences for me and do all that stuff. And I'm very, very young in the game. But when you hear watching wrestling shows me a lot of what not to do, because the things that we badger on from the wrestling commentary are really, it translates over to MMA. In MMA, one of the good things they do in wrestling is they tell stories, because sometimes there's a lot of downtime in MMA. You want to still be able to tell those stories. By the way, gate 1.9 million. 12,668 people at Stockholm. Performances of the night, Hadzovic and Velichovic. Fight of the night, fight of the night, Gustafsson and Teixeira. Weird that Hermanson didn't get one of those.
Well, the people that were...
Or Sabata.
I was just going to say, man, the next fight I want to talk about is Peter Sabata, who took on Ben Saunders. Now, there's always been a theory. I think I asked Dana about this once. I think he flat out told me and a couple of the media members, well, we basically, or was it Joe Silva? But they basically look at when they're giving out, or they did, they're giving out these performance bonuses. It generally happens to fighters a little bit higher on the card because you are doing something versus a higher caliber talent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So someone like Hadzovic, who does it to Marcin Held, I was going to say, do you think, Sean, that that's perhaps the UFC saying thank you?
Yes.
Okay, so we move. So that as the POTUSes continue to move on, or you move up the card, the talent level gets more difficult, or the talent level is higher in comparison to those in the lower portions of the card. So the difficulty of finishing should technically be more difficult. So when it happens at a higher level, like Peter Sabota did with Ben Saunders, you can say whatever you want, ladies and gentlemen, Ben Saunders being finished, he doesn't belong in the UFC. He's still a high caliber fighter. Sabota he had to do in the second round, coming out with that TKO knee. He was ruthless in that fight, and he had to do what he had to do to finish Ben Saunders. I thought he performed fantastic, and it was finally the first of 3 dominoes that ended the night in spectacular fashion.
I think that Saunders absolutely belongs in the UFC. He's 5-2. He's lost to Sabata and Cote, and then in Bellator is really his last run. He just lost to Lima, so he's a really good gatekeeper. He is the type of guy that you want in that division to weed out people who don't belong there. I can't believe he protested that stoppage, but then again, I'm pretty sure he had 9 concussions in that fight.
Bingo.
So I shouldn't be that surprised that he protested the stoppage, because he probably didn't know any better at that point. That was a good stoppage. Maybe could have been stopped earlier, but I'm not really harping on that, because Saunders kept getting up. He kept getting up every single time Sabata would knock him down or knock him loopy. Ben Saunders would come right back and find a way to stay in it. But that's a big win for Peter Sabata too, because I mean they've got they're running these events in Europe all the time, but they have a tough time finding people to keep at that like co-main event level. And outside of dropping the fight to Kyle Noak in Noak's home country, Peter Sabata has done very well. I think he's 4-1 in the UFC, so that could be somebody to watch out for, at least for the UFC. They got to be thrilled.
Well, yeah. So a couple of things come to mind with what you just mentioned. The stoppage, I went back and forth with a gentleman on Twitter. Very, very good, good exchange. Basically agreeing with the fact that the stoppage was fine. Now, if this was a title fight, and this was Ben Saunders competing for the welterweight title, maybe you let it go a little bit more. I understand the fighter safety argument. You have to. It's way more important. Fighter safety is way more important than somebody winning a title. I totally get that. I understand that. But you're always going to give a little bit of credence to a contender or a challenger in a title fight, because this could be their only opportunity for their career. You're about to make a decision for someone, a.k.a. Mario Yamasaki, Frank Trigg, that could cost the fighter $1 million in potential revenue very, very soon. George St. Pierre always told me, he goes, I'm not worried. He goes, every fighter's tough. Every single fighter that competes in the UFC, in the octagon, is tough. Pearson has said it, but George has always told me, when you're defending that title, you're competing against another human being who that night is willing to die. Fighters say they're always willing to die when they step into the cage or into the octagon or into a ring. Not necessarily. That just means that they're tough, they're talking tough, they're going to do what they want to do. When they move up the rankings and they get to a world title fight, this is the breaking point. This is the fork going left, or the fork in the road going left, or the fork in the road going right. You're willing to die that night. So when you're the world champion, you're fighting against a guy who's willing, or girl who's willing to die that night. So it's very difficult sometimes to finish them. So you got to respect that. But in a regular fight, not even a real contender fight like this one between Sabota and Saunders, it's not a contender fight. There's 2 guys at welterweight trying to throw their names in the mix, trying to move up the rankings, trying to get ranked. So the fact that Ben Saunders has proven that he could take a bunch of baseball bats to the skull doesn't mean he has to keep taking them. There's nothing really for him to take it for. There's no belt on the line. So I like this stoppage. Now, I had conversations with guys like Big John McCarthy during the Sarah McMahon and Ronda Rousey fight, where the stoppage was too early, as an example. Well, in my opinion, and I asked John about this, Sarah McMahon should have been given a bit more leeway to continue in that fight, even though Ronda Rousey dropped her. It was a world title fight. You got to give her a little bit more leeway. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Sean?
Definitely. I completely understand. And a lot of judges, or not judges, referees, will establish that. Just last night, there are some that will say, even at the low-level amateur level, I'm more lenient to let professional fights go longer, because a lot of you amateurs have got to go to work on Monday. And a lot of you amateurs aren't getting paid. So if I see something and I think your knee's in danger. I think that something else is in danger. I'm going to end it for your good. And I think that's done at the pro levels as well, and I completely agree with it.
We move on to the co-main event where, I put my 416 hat, hashtag the 6, tweeted out that my boy Misha Serkinov is about to step in the octagon at UFC Stockholm, co-main event, taking on Volkan Oezdemir, a guy I know pretty well, Titan FC. Said to myself, you know what? I don't want to really have an allegiance, but I'm from Toronto. Got to give love to Misha Serkinov. Boom, I jump on the bandwagon, ready to go, looking out the window, cheering. 28 seconds later, Volkan Oezdemir hits him with a right to the ear. Timber, down goes Serkinov, fight over.
Arm punch to the ear. Just nothing behind it. It was impressive. This is the same guy who got tapped out to a neck crank 2 years ago in Bellator, and now he is the top 5 light heavyweight, maybe climbing a little bit more after beating Serkinov, because we questioned if he belonged as a top 5 guy after he just beat Ovent St. Preux in a split decision. And before that, he had fought as a heavyweight for like a couple years before that. But he put Misha Serkinov to bed, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Like that's a guy who won his first 4 UFC fights in Misha Serkinov. And to me, if I'm the UFC, I got Oezdemir and Gustafsson queued up for an event in Europe. Main event.
I don't know if I remember. Did Oezdemir not call out Jimmy Manuwa?
He did, but if he wants to fight Jimmy Manuwa on that Jones Cormier show, yeah, sure, why not?
But you like the Gustafsson Oezdemir fight better? I
do. And in the main event in Europe, I like Gustafsson fighting anybody but for the title.
All right. So I concur. I 100% concur. He's got to win at least one more fight, but does a victory potentially, we're getting into what ifs and hypotheticals here, does a victory over Volkan Oezdemir give him a title shot?
Who, Gustafsson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in this landscape, well, it depends. It depends on when Jimmy Manuwa gets his shot. If he can beat whoever he's supposed to beat in July, then Jimmy Manuwa probably gets the next title shot. But otherwise, yeah, if Jimmy Manuwa loses or something, then sure, yeah, a win over Volkan Oezdemir gets it. I mean, look at how things were before, Joe. Pulling out of a fight against Gegard Mousasi got him a title fight. Losing to Anthony Johnson got him a title fight. That's why I am saying just because he beat Glover Teixeira doesn't give him a title shot, because he's already been given a title shot for literally doing nothing. And even worse than nothing, losing. Well, I don't know if losing is worse than nothing, but he did get deaded by Anthony Johnson.
I would rather see Volkan versus Jimmy Manuwa, with the winner getting a title shot.
Yeah, I would be okay with that. I mean, to be honest, I mean, if Volkan can beat Jimmy Manuwa, there's no reason you can't do that. It's not like the whole pay-per-view would hinge on Jimmy Manuwa getting a title shot. It's going to be Cormier or Jones that sell that show.
Yes.
I mean, whether it's against Manuwa or Oezdemir.
So we move on to the main event with Alexander Gustafsson. There were some, I didn't want to say anything. I should have, could have, would have, but I didn't until I realized it's already on social media. People were posting, what did they call him? Forster Gustafsson, because of the running that he was doing in and around the cage. He was just sprinting around every time Glover tried to do anything, which technically is okay because you want to get the center of the cage, but you can do it without sprinting. You can do it without jogging. You can do it with angles. So once or twice, I get it, but he did it so many times that, boom, those gifts started popping up of Forrest Gump running past that fence and going down the neighborhood down the road. And I think people were able to either put Alexander on there or whatever. I thought it was hilarious. But it was a bit disturbing. But what wasn't disturbing was when Alexander realized he was picking away at Glover Teixeira, and those uppercuts slowly but surely started picking away. The elbows started picking away. Some of the ground and pound. I thought John Gooden had a fantastic call. I quoted it in one of my tweets and an item I posted on Facebook during the fight, where he basically said Teixeira is absorbing. Was it Teixeira is absorbing a hailstorm of elbows without an umbrella? Like that's beauty right there. But as the time went on, Teixeira's pulling this Brazilian zombie thing where he keeps coming forward, and then in that fifth round, Uppercut 1 lands, and time stopped for Glover Teixeira. Gustafsson noticed it. Fake left, uppercut number 2. Time really stood still. Fake left, uppercut number 3, steps off to the side, basically right hooker across, drops him, fight over. Gustafsson wins in the 5th round. That, to me, was a 21-minute and 7-second fight that I absolutely loved. That's what I like to see when I'm watching fights, not the other stuff, the glorified sparring that we saw in some of the earlier bouts. Gustafsson wins. And I said it before the show, a lot of people don't give him enough credit. The fact he may not have emerged victorious as many times as we've seen over the past few years, but he's a top guy in this division, having only lost to the likes of Daniel Cormier, John Jones, and Anthony Rumble Johnson. He now emerges victorious, takes out a very game Glover Teixeira, and now finds himself in an interesting situation. Your thoughts on the fight, sir?
Love to fight. Like, until Teixeira got finished, you never knew if he was actually out of the fight, even though it looked like he was about to be finished on multiple occasions. Gustafsson is that weird mix of really good technical MMA and then just abandoning everything technical, the sprinting and stuff. I didn't have a problem with that. Usually I did. I had somebody saying he should be warned, have a point taken away. No, it worked. He popped in. He would land combinations, then sprint away. And that's just MMA, and it worked, and he won the fight, so I can't have that much of a problem with it. This wasn't boring at all. He mixed in takedowns really well. I question what a lot of these long, violent fights are going to do for him in the long run, but he won tonight. He won in September, so he's back on the horse. Don't want to see him get that title shot, as I mentioned, but man, what a fight this was. And he proposed to his fiance, proposed to his girlfriend. That caps off an even better day for him. I loved this fight. I love how unpredictable he is inside the cage. It makes for entertainment. It's really hard to scout him. It's very, very hard to scout him. And really the only person that's been able to put him away with any type of quickness is Anthony Johnson. And that's just because, well, and Phil Davis kind of, but that was 7 years ago. That barely even counts. But well, Anthony Johnson is just that guy.
Right now on the live chat, Sean, is basically saying he'd rather see Manoa versus Gustafsson again. It's long enough for them to fight again. They trained together to Lone Wolf. I don't think they'll be fighting.
Yeah, that was 3 years ago. It was a great fight, but no, I think you kind of got to mix that up a little bit. You got to mix the Ozdemirs in with the Manoas, because otherwise you're going to have that carousel of Cormier, Jones, Gustafsson, Teixeira at the top. You got to mix in a Shogun. You got to mix in an Ozdemir. You got to mix in some of these guys. You got to do that. You got to mix in some of the new guys with some of the old guys. Corey Anderson, throw him in there. Do what you can. Even Antigulov and any of those. They did it with Blachowicz last year. Put him against Gustafsson. So, yeah.
A certain do you remember that guy that was a top contender in the division? I think his name was Anthony Rumble Johnson. Remember him?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
the guy who had the worst game plan ever
against DC and Buffalo.
Yes.
Rumble is, I don't know if Rumble is trolling on Twitter right now or if he's serious. And I quote, "I'm getting that itch. Show these boys how to throw an uppercut the right way." End quote.
Rumble said that?
He did.
Okay, well then, all right,
he's got
buddy.
a picture of the Rams helmet on his Twitter.
Okay, dude. I don't want to hear him say anything after the way that he fought Daniel Cormier and the Wolf tickets that he sold to everybody. He thieved money from people by employing that game plan. It's embarrassing.
I agree. What we saw there, but I think based on all the stuff that we'd heard him say in the post-fight interview and afterwards, he had checked out long before he probably got into that fight, basically saying, "I'm done. I'm not taking this head trauma anymore. I don't want any more CTE."
I think he checked out in the fall. And that's why he refused the interim title fight.
You think so?
Yeah, I think because they were going to go with Musashi versus Rumble, and who knows? Musashi could be light heavyweight champion right now in the UFC had that happen. But I think he had checked out then, and that's why he refused to fight for an interim title. I think he considered himself to have one more fight and was happy to do that with Cormier.
Well, that's the whole card right there. We've gone up and down. We've discussed it. We put some grades out there. Anything else you want to discuss regarding this hashtag UFC Stockholm card? Because, again, like I said, it was I was almost pulling my teeth out as I was watching it until eventually it ended on a very high note. Enough to say that the last 3 fights and what happened in that main event, and then what happened with Alexander proposing to his now fiance, kind of gave me that sort of, okay, it wasn't that bad. It was actually good. They did enough for me to make me happy. Your thoughts?
Decent show. I didn't get to start watching it until a little bit later, so I got to catch up, and that made it a lot better for me. Otherwise, I just want to thank people for watching Premier MMA Championship 3 on Flow Combat. Thank you to all of you who came up and actually told me that you like Fightful. That's always awesome to hear. We want people to check out our forums, pro wrestling, MMA, boxing, movies, music, all that good stuff. We had our first ever Fightful Books It on the podcast page. I book an Aiden English storyline. We've got me and Joe coming back this Tuesday. We got UFC this Saturday. LOL at Roy Nelson fleecing Bellator for some money. Good for him.
What happened there?
He signed with Bellator, so they're paying him. They're paying him.
I love Roy.
Hey, cool. Whatever. Good on UFC for making a deal with the UFC hospital. Good on UFC for making that deal to get that done. Hopefully it helps the fighters. Yeah, that's really all I got.
I've been in contact, ladies and gentlemen, with the legendary Burt Watson. Burt may join me or may join us on Tuesday's podcast. I'm looking to record something with him. He's a busy dude, having recently got a new promotion. He's back and forth. He's currently in Vegas right now. He's asked me to contact him tomorrow. If I can do something with him tomorrow, I will let everybody know. He'll join us on Tuesday. If I can only record with him on Tuesday, we'll do it the following week. Burt has more stories than you could ever possibly imagine. You think I have stories? Whew. Burt will destroy. I used to sit with Burt all the time. Didn't matter what city we were in, we would meet, a shot of Grand Marnier and a Heineken. That was religion. Shot of Grand Marnier, Heineken, and we would just chat for 2 or 3 hours. Not even 2 or 3 hours. I would say an hour and a half, because he's a military boy, former military guy. He needs to be in bed by 6:37 p.m. I'm like, dude, my night's not even started. So hopefully Burt Watson gets back to me. Or sorry, hopefully I can connect with Burt Watson, and you guys can hear him on the Tuesday edition of the Holy Smokes podcast. Anything else, Sean?
That's it. Visit Fightful.com. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you to everyone tuned in live, and to everyone afterwards on Stitcher and on iTunes. We always thank you. Don't forget, please spread the news, retweet whenever we get a chance to talk about the podcast. Please join us on Tuesday afternoons, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get your thoughts. Share it. We're growing. We're loving it. We're having a great time. I love being part of Fightful. Love working with a guy like Sean Sapp and Jimmy Van, Mike Straw, and everybody on the team. It's been fantastic thus far. Follow us on social media at Fightful.com. At Fightful. There's at Fightful MMA. There's myself at Showdown Joe, and of course at Sean Sapp for just dumbness on Instagram that makes no sense with what's happening in the real world. But it is Sean Sapp, and we love him.
I'm a superstar. I'm a superstar, Joe.
Everyone just do this.
Did you see me troll Jimmy Van
on Instagram?
Oh, I got to send you the link. I got to send you the link of me trolling Jimmy Van with the green screen I bought.
Oh, no.
It was great.
This I got to see. I've got a green screen somewhere set up. I had it to my immediate left, your screen right, ladies and gentlemen, that I used to do videos for, but I think got taken down. It's a bit of work. If you like it, Sean, it's a bit of work, but I do a lot of videos when I'm not working with Fightful for another one of my businesses. So love video, love editing, but man, it can be time consuming. But doesn't matter. Irrelevant. Guys, girls, thank you very much for tuning in. Please tell a friend. Tell 3, tell 5, tell 10, like Sean says. We're trying to grow here, and we're trying to become the best place for everything combat sports related, professional wrestling, obviously MMA, boxing, you name it. We want to talk about it. We enjoy it. We love it. You're not going to find people more passionate than all of us here at Fightful.com. For now, we say thank you very much for those who tuned in live. Thank you to everyone tuning in a little bit later on iTunes and on Stitcher. I will see all of you with Sean Ross Sapp Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern with the Holy Smokes podcast. Ciao for now.